Welcome to the Quick 10 podcast, brought to you by Cuick Trac, focusing on all things FedCon and Cyber Defense from different perspectives and different personalities, all in 10-ish minutes. Here's your host, Derek White.
Our guest today is Patrick Colantonio, Vice President at NeQter Labs. Patrick, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, Derek. Glad to be on the flagship episode of this podcast. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, thanks for joining. For those that don't know, and there probably aren't many that do, but we go way back. I want to say 2017, probably, when we first started talking with you and your team. And it's amazing in, call it 7 years, which sucks to say that out loud, how quick that went. How things are a little bit different than they were, specifically in our space, but cybersecurity and compliance world together. You talk a little bit about NeQter and where you guys are today, maybe from where you were, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we'll get into the topic right away.
Yeah, well, back in 2017, when DoD was really serious the first time rolling out their CY initiative, 7 years later, here we are. But first and foremost, anything we're doing starts with a pun, right? So I really love the title we're going for here. I
can't promise good puns in every title for this podcast, but this one was easy.
You gotta set the bar. Any good pun is also worth forcing, right? So if the other episodes you force it, that's okay. It comes with the territory.
That's right.
But in terms of NeQter, where we are as a company, where the product has come a long way. But in terms of our core goals and focus of supporting small business in the defense industrial base, trying to provide meaningful products that add value and also help them to adhere to compliance. We've been doing that since day one, since we got our start in 2016. For the NIST 800-171 initiative, trying to build a platform of products that we thought small businesses would be lacking or outside of regulation wouldn't typically go and get. Of course, mid and large and enterprise companies have either regulatory things to meet or just best cybersecurity. So they kind of already have those tools in place. So we wanted to come out with SIEM, come out with inventory, come out with vulnerability scanning. And yeah, we've been working together for a long time, trying to thread the needle and provide products to small business.
So it seems you don't have a SIM, like a SIM card or anything like that at NeQter Labs.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes, I try to go both ways with it, just because some people, but at the end of the day, it's all logging.
Yes.
Logging and aggregation. Yeah. It's all logging, right? So,
well, wish if this was the Quick 60 podcast, then we could go on for our terrible jokes for a lot longer than that. So,
there's not enough time for that.
No. So, well, thanks for spending some time here. And, again, we're not looking to spend a week talking about a topic here, but want to just roll through a couple things with you. Keep this very cordial. So, first and foremost, there are people out there who probably aren't overly familiar with, what a SIEM is. What is it truthfully? Like what does it do? Why is it important? Before getting into some more of the details. So can you just give a very brief definition of what it is, and then we'll get into some more further details, more specific to how NeQter does it.
Yeah, a SIEM from a big picture standpoint is going to provide insight into your environment, your organization, by essentially it's going to be pulling in logs and log data and other insights from all of the different applications, all of the different endpoints, servers, cloud environment, whatever you're defining as your scope of your entirety of the organization. It's going to be pulling and presenting information to indicate potential areas of compromise, areas of inefficiency. It's really just going to be painting a broad picture of what is happening in my network today. And especially if in tandem with other tool sets, if they flag something, if you have an EDR or antivirus that has a preventative measure, SIEM is really going to allow you to go back and rebuild what happened at that moment in time, either from a forensic standpoint or just to clue you into what's happening.
Right on. And when it comes to the importance of that, so say it's 2024 now, right? So where were things, in your opinion, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, just as an industry as a whole, not maybe specific to just where NeQter Labs spent their time, but the importance of why do what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of SIEM and capability, I mean, the capability has increased tenfold over the past, 5 to 6 years. I mean, just looking at the landscape in general of why SIEM is important or why similar tools like SIEM are important. I mean, prior to 2020, I mean, there's always been breaches and there's always been a lot of compromise at the consumer level with a lot of different broad consumer products. I mean, just look at the Marriott breach.
Mhm.
But between now and the last, since 2019, there's been at least a bajillion breaches at the federal and the agency level. I mean, one of the biggest things that where because the private industry is always going to lead the charge, they're always going to be at the tip of the spear. And then when you have regulation come into play, or especially when there's stuff coming out of the White House, regardless of the administration, I mean, there's been several executive orders about specifically SIEM capabilities regarding aggregation of logs and reporting and incident response. There's been several executive orders. There's been agency level directives, which are just going to trickle down into private industry as mandates, just because, I mean, to put it bluntly, the federal government's been embarrassed the past 5 years with multiple breaches of not just from the military, but also personnel. I mean, the OMB breach, comes to mind.
Mhm.
So where things are going from a capability standpoint, before SIEM was really just to kind of shoot a flare, raise a flag, let you know that something has transpired. But as we move forward, especially as traditional infrastructure moving down to the endpoint and protection of the endpoint has changed, especially with endpoint detection and response with EDR, you really see where EDR paired with SIEM, paired with especially getting seasoned with machine learning or especially AI,
Mhm.
reactive and protective and preventative measures, that's really going to be the future of how quickly can we thwart a breach as soon as there is a detected potentially malicious or even just an incident that can get quarantined and reviewed. Maybe it wasn't malicious, but it was definitely something that was out of the ordinary, an anomaly. So that's really where SIEM is moving in the future.
That is a piece that I think a lot of people want to put into automation and try to lessen the burden on that. But how much reliance can you have on something that is machine learning or quote AI? It's still going to come down to the human element, because the attacks aren't just sophisticated digital attacks. There's social engineering. There's different ways that breaches, as you said, they happen. Some of them are very embarrassing. I think we've seen some companies seem to spend more time on their breach response plan than they actually do on their incident response plan, where very impressive response to a breach, but maybe if they had shifted some of that effort towards NIST Standard 171 CMMC realm, that has changed quite a bit since we first started working together years ago. It's a huge topic. There's a lot of small businesses, a lot of disadvantaged businesses in the supply chain of the Department of Defense and across the federal government contracting space. But where do you guys are tailored for this specific market so well, but where you see the struggles from organizations that are looking to achieve these compliance requirements?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, there's been a lot of different companies that we've worked with, all different sizes, and the commonality across is really when it comes to resources that they have, whether it's from a monetary standpoint, financial, whether it's from a personnel standpoint, technical expertise. A lot of the SIEM vendors that are out there are definitely tailored towards mid-market enterprise. So they are relying upon having dedicated personnel, dedicated time, and prior experience with a product like theirs in order to be successful. So when you're looking at not only just the financial cost of purchasing a product, there's additional man hour time and trial and error. And one of the biggest things with setting up a SIEM is having it work for your environment and having to tailor it. So how long is it going to be before that SIEM is operational and efficient? And what we see is more often than not, the SIEMs aren't operational, and they're definitely far and away efficient from their setup. So what we try to do with NeQter is have a lot of commonality of different vendors that we see in the space, different types of setups, and then also, of course, what needs to be configured for CMMC, where we have a lot of things built out of the box and ready to go on day one. Like we had a client one time where we uh, we got them the product. We had the procurement. We shipped our one of our appliances to them to stand up, and I had actually gotten an email from someone in their purchasing department that was clearly a fish, and I reached out and I said, "Hey, think something happened with one of your mailboxes," and they said, "We know. We actually installed NeQter in the afternoon, and we were able to pull in our 365 logs and spot that hijacked mailbox on
Mm.
day one, and it had happened actually the morning of that same day. So they were able to go into NeQter and do a post op, where with other SIEMs, that could have taken longer, or they might not have ever seen it, because another issue with SIEMs is just so much log data potentially if it's not set up correctly. And NeQter does a lot of pre-parsing to eliminate noise. So that's one example. Especially when it comes to this market, CMMC, a lot of small businesses, this is their first SIEM purchase, so they don't know how to evaluate. They don't know even how to really use it, and they definitely don't have one full-time employee or one FTE person to dedicate to. Hey, can you just babysit this one application forever? It's just not. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and that I think that's a great final point there on that topic is it seems so easy to have something and check
Okay.
boxes that you have. I know, sorry, I can't pass it up. But the having something, having it plugged in and having it and saying I have it in your documentation does not mean that you're using it correctly. And I think from our perspective too, that's where we see a lot of the eye openers is, oh, that's okay. So now I see why that's important, specifically from the DoD's eyes or the government's eyes on, yeah, I should be able to have this monitored. And you mentioned scope. If scope changes, think about how many things changed 4 years ago when the pandemic hit. And now we've got people working from home. We've got
Oh, everyone
locations.
went to cloud.
Oh, for
Maybe
sure.
that's one thing we didn't mention, where it's been such a shift,
Yeah.
seismic shift of everyone moving from traditional on-prem to cloud, and not factoring in the massive surface area that they're introducing with
Hmm.
that move.
And now we're seeing moves of a different type. People are consolidating offices. Now they're opening new offices. They're shifting people and locations and migrating together. And yeah, but it's a great feeling to be able to know that you can see things that are off. You can not everything is serious, right? That's another big topic, that not everything's a breach. Not every incident is a breach. All that kind of stuff is being able to have a grip on that, but assigning that responsibility and accountability is a huge deal, because what good is identifying a breach if you don't know how to shut it off and learn from that. So well, okay. Well, thank you. This was the whole intent of the Quick 10 podcast, is to try to get through topics like this. So thanks for joining us. Our, again, overall goal here is just to help businesses better understand a SIEM implementation and, what's important and what's going to change in the future. Changes are coming. They will. They always will. So thanks for being a good sport and jumping on here. If people do want to learn more about NeQter Labs, where would you like them to go, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, our website is number one first good place to go. So nectarlabs.com, NeQterlabs.com. And we do have monthly webinars where I review new features, do Q&A. We have a YouTube channel, again, at NeQter Labs. You can check that out. And then, of course, I'm always available via LinkedIn or email if you want to hit me up at P-A-T, at nectarlabs.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Probably need to do the disclaimer here that this was a conversation for education purposes and not legal advice by any means. So, but please reach out to NeQter, and you can always visit our website as well at www.cuicktrac.com. Cuick is spelled C-U-I-C-K, just like the title of the podcast, and we can help you there. So thanks again, Patrick, and for joining us. And for future episodes of the Cuick Trac podcast, you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and then some other platforms as we continue on. So thank you again, Patrick, and we'll look forward to you being on as a guest next time.
Yep. Thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Yep. See ya.